Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here, and today I want to talk to you guys a little bit about why it doesn't matter how a pro bodybuilder trains in terms of you and your personal gains and your personal results. So make that on my +5 out of weaponsmithing. Work on skilling up my crafting a little bit, and let's talk about this. Because a lot of people will see big pro bodybuilders out there and they will say, hey, this guy's massive, he's huge, he's ripped, he must know a lot about training, and maybe there are things that I could learn from him that'll carry over to my own training and my own results. And in some cases that might be true. I'm not saying a lot of them don't have some good training tips, because oftentimes they do, but what you need to remember, like with any other individual out there who is in an extreme situation, whatever they're pursuing, that just because they are doing one thing doesn't mean that that thing is going to help you, and it doesn't mean that that thing that they're advising is responsible for their success. In fact, if you're not doing everything that they are doing, then just taking little tidbits may or may not help you. And you need to be able to look at this stuff objectively and understand how these principles apply in the body if you're trying to gain muscle strength, whatever it is you happen to be doing. Because the reality is, and let's just be frank, most pro bodybuilders, if not all, are walking chemical experiments. They're walking lab experiments. And what I mean is, if you guys recall Rich Piana back when he was alive, when he did his bigger by the day cycle, a lot of people who were new to all that, they haven't been around all that stuff, were shocked. They're like, wait, this guy is injecting himself like 15, 20 times a week, just on like 7 different drugs and all these rotations and cocktails and tons and tons of injections and pills and everything else. And a lot of people were coming in, and I did a breakdown of it, who were saying, actually, I don't know, I know pro bodybuilders who use more than this. This is conservative, or this is normal. And so when people talk about that, and they say, oh, well, they're using drugs, and yeah, that matters, but you'd be surprised how much they are using. It is usually a lot more than you think it is. It's not like they're just doing a little bit of stuff. These people are putting sometimes 7 or 8 different substances in their body that have all sorts of synergistic muscle building and fat burning effects, sometimes at doses 20, 30, 50 times higher than's ever been tested in a human being before. So you need to let that sink in for a moment. In other words, some of these guys are using 5 different things at 20 times any dose that's ever been prescribed in a human, all at the same time. So when you put it in that perspective, you've got to understand that these guys are going to gain muscle, particularly because they're usually genetically gifted no matter what they do. And what you're going to find is that if you're not doing everything that they're doing, the 1 or 2 things that their bits of advice are giving out may not help you. And in fact, a lot of pro bodybuilders do things that we know scientifically have no effect. Like, they do tons of stuff just because it's tradition and circles and tips they all hand out that don't actually help you at all. I mean, stuff like constant tension on muscles. I mean, tons of physiologists look at that and say there's no point to that. There's literally no benefit metabolically in the muscle to doing that. It's not going to help you gain a single drop of extra muscle. It doesn't do anything. It's pointless unless you just happen to enjoy doing it. It's all about the workload, the tension, the muscle fiber recruitment. Those things all matter, but just keeping constant tension, for example, has never been found in any study to do anything to muscle protein synthesis, muscle growth, nothing. But a lot of them like to do it, and it's a tradition, and they say, hey, it helps, it helps. But you got to ask, how would they really know it helps? When you're on 8 different anabolic drugs, how do you actually know what's working in the gym or not? The fact that you're training at all is probably stimulating enormous amounts of growth. Anyone who comes in the gym and trains hard when they're on 8 different drugs that build muscle is probably going to have no trouble gaining muscle, no matter how they train. But here's the other thing you've got to factor in. What happens when they don't get the results they want? Whenever pro bodybuilders have a muscle that's not growing at the rate that they want it to, they just inject it full of oil anyways. That's not the exception to the rule. That's the norm. Most of these guys have pints and pints of oil injected into lagging muscles to bring those up too. So at a certain point, you got to look at that and go, wait a minute, they use massive cocktails of drugs. They're all genetically gifted for building muscle, and yet they're still not getting the results they want in this muscle or that muscle, so they just fill it full of oil. They just fill it full of oil with a syringe. And again, that's normal. That's not the exception. That's the standard practice in their world. So at a certain point, you got to look at that and go, okay, well, yeah, this may not all work for me, what they're doing. If these guys knew so much about bicep training, why are they adding 2 inches of extra diameter to their bicep, injecting it with stuff if they knew that much about bicep training, because they're on all these drugs and everything, and it's still not, they're not getting the results they want? Something's wrong here. Maybe they don't know, and you might want to factor that in. And here's the other thing. You also have to look at the genetic component, because the reality is everyone is not born with the same genetics for building muscle, for gaining strength, for gaining speed, for playing the piano, for doing math. We all have different gifts. We all have different genes. And I'm not saying we don't have most of the overlap. We do. We're over 99% identical. But that less than 1% difference from person to person, when you start comparing different endeavors, it matters a lot. And what I mean is, I've met plenty of kids at the gym who do try to do this. They do go on these pro bodybuilder amounts of drugs. They try to train just like the pro bodybuilders, and they get good results. They get good results. They gain muscle. I've seen plenty of them gain 20, 25 pounds of muscle. They still don't get pro bodybuilder size. They don't look like those guys look. Right? Why? Well, number one, they don't have the genetics they have. Not everyone is going to get gifted. And yeah, we know the drugs work on everyone. You don't even have to lift weights for these things to put muscle on you. There have been quite a few studies done on that where they've taken people who, were recreational lifters. I'm not saying hardcore athletes. I'm not saying hardcore bodybuilders. I'm saying people who had training experience, who go to the gym 3-4 days a week, work out. There have been multiple studies where they were given moderate amounts of these substances and told in the study, and it was controlled, and they had to follow these if they wanted to be part of the study, to quit training. They all gained muscle. They all gained muscle even without working out. I'm not saying they wouldn't gain more if they worked out, but it's been shown in multiple studies that they're going to gain muscle on these things even if you quit training. So yeah, these kids will come in and they'll do this, but the thing is, they don't have the genetics to get big like these guys do. They just don't. And even on all the drugs, and the fact of the matter is, you're only going to gain so much muscle in 1 year, no matter how you train. You need to understand, a lot of these pro bodybuilders have been doing this. They've been using these large amounts of these substances and training this way for 5 years, 8 years, 10 years. You're not going to come in and do what they do and in a year from now look like they do. Dallas McCarver tried. He was the youngest guy to turn pro in bodybuilding, wasn't he? He earned his pro card at 21. How many years did that take him? He started really young. He started abusing these drugs really young. Died 5 years after he earned his pro card. He died from drug abuse. Killed him. Now, that was probably, about 8 years? But it took him 3 years of abusing his body to the point to where he only lived another 5 years to get there. So that's the other problem, is the time component. I mean, people can try to emulate what they do, but if you think that's going to be an overnight fix and that you're just going to go do a bunch of drugs and in 6 months you're going to be that size, I don't think so. Because you still haven't done everything that they've done. You didn't pick their genetics, you didn't pick the right parents, and you haven't done this for 5 years straight. So you're still not doing everything that they're doing. And people have to look at it in those terms, and they've got to have realistic expectations with this. And people who say, well, okay, so yeah, their training would still probably work for me the way that they train. Sure, the drugs give them an enormous advantage, but would it help me some? Maybe. But why don't you go with the proven methods that we know, been observed by many coaches over the years, that get plenty of guys big and strong? And that's to focus on the basics, focus on progressive overload, mastering the basic lifts, getting strong on the basic lifts, and then, if you have another muscle, you have some muscles that you think need to be growing a little faster, do some extra work for them. Right? This is a time-proven method that we know works for drug-free guys. It's worked for 100 years. Works. No need to jump over and try to do what these guys do, because here's the thing. You've got to remember, their training is facilitated by substances that improve work capacity, and they improve recovery. And I mean, they improve recovery enormously. So yeah, these guys can come in and they can do 2-hour-long workouts where they just beat on a body part, like their chest and their triceps, for 2 hours straight. Do 20 sets. You know what? They're taking drugs that allow them to maintain their performance for a 2-hour workout. If you're not still able to train hard an hour and a half into your workout and move respectable workloads on each set, you're not stimulating muscle growth. These guys take substances that help with that. Furthermore, these things help with recovery. You know what? If you're not recovered in less than 48 hours after training a muscle, if that muscle's not recovered, it's not going to grow. That's what you have to remember also. The recovery process and parts of it are essential for a muscle to grow. If you come in and try to train the way a lot of these guys do, you may gain almost no muscle at all. Because the amount of volume you're doing, your recovery curve, your frequency isn't situated for someone not on a bunch of these substances. So yeah, it'll work great for these guys. It'll work great for them. Doesn't mean that it's going to be timed properly for you. And that's the whole point, guys. Be careful trying to emulate what a lot of these guys do. You've got to understand a lot of these guys are, number one, genetic freaks. Number two, on mind-boggling amount of drugs. And number three, a lot of them don't even know anything about training. You'd be shocked when you talk to some of them. A lot of them are very knowledgeable about physiology and anatomy and sports sciences. A lot of them literally know less than the average football player in high school does about it. You'd be surprised. A lot of them are basically just the dumb jock who never learned anything, doesn't even necessarily even know the names of the muscles he's working, what those muscles do in the body, how many heads that muscle has. You'd be shocked. You'd be shocked if you actually listen to interviews over the years from some of these guys. Some of them don't even know this basic stuff. They just come in and train and do a bunch of volume and get a pump and go home, and they get massive. Because again, genetics and drugs go a long way. But if that's not you, you're going to have to be smarter about it than they are. You're probably going to have to learn a little bit, but I'm going to tell you this much. You probably need to focus on the basics. Build your base. Do the things that we know work. Squats, deadlifts, bench presses, overhead presses, weighted chin-ups, barbell rows. Get strong on the basic lifts. Eat plenty of protein. Eat your fruits and vegetables. Eat a good balanced diet. Do some cardio. Do some conditioning work. Build your base up. Train hard, but stay within your maximum recoverable volume. Don't try to train 6 days a week. Follow proven training protocols that you know work for natural guys. Build your base and stop worrying about what these pro bodybuilders are doing, because I can tell you right now, 80% of what these guys do is not going to work for you. It's going to be a waste of your time. Alright guys, but that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I will talk to you guys next time.